I mean, for F's sake, we had Senate hearings on steroids in baseball, right? And we can't look at what might be a huge election fraud that went up there. Just look at it.
Welcome to Pull the Pin Already, a place where average veterans come to share their opinions on the world we live in. We can't guarantee you're going to like our opinions,
but we promise we're going to enjoy giving them to you.
I'm Jim.
Hey, and I'm Mike.
Hey, I'm Nate.
Hey, I'm Paul.
Hey, guys, let's pull the pin.
A whole lot of hay in here.
Hey, I think Nate's been here one too many times.
All right, I'm out. See you.
All right, so we're just gonna let Paul determine what topic we're gonna discuss today.
I kind of wanted to segue off what you guys were talking about the other day when the swamp was back.
The swamp is back.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of meat left in that episode to talk about. But as we went through, it was funny. Jim had asked Mike, like, well, so, you know, how do we change people's minds? And Mike and I answered like at the same time, even though I was watching it. The answer was one mind at a time, right? Right. And then, but the way you finished it up, Jim, is you brought up, you said, there's a lot of, leaders that came from the ranks of the military. That's what they taught us to do, how to problem solve and how to lead. And you had asked the question kind of at the very end there on what is it that we as veterans can do to change the way forward. Right. You remember that?
Yeah, this is my person of the week already, Mike. Look, he watched their episodes.
Well, Mike was like, hey, you want to be on? I was like, I got to look at your last episode. He was like, no, don't do that. So I had to go watch it. But anyway, a thought that it led me to, like politically, when I became kind of politically aware, I really became kind of a staunch constitutionalist. Spent a lot of time studying the Constitution, looking at constitutional law, looking at Supreme Court cases, looking at how the Constitution had been followed, or more often than I would like to admit, abused. And in the course of doing that, I was also teaching soldiers up to the tune of, I had like 1 year over 5,000 soldiers that I was interacting with within that year. And I would teach a class and give the obligatory, 10-minute break after 50 minutes of instruction. I'd pop my head out and I'd whip a cigarette down. And the people that were still left inside, I would ask them, like, hey, when you took an oath of enlistment, what's in that oath? And that we swore that we would uphold and defend the Constitution, the document, not the government itself, but the document itself, which is a very interesting principle if you think about it, right? And so I would follow the question with, well, what are you going to defend that with? And then you get the typical, my M4, my M9, a 2. No. I mean, like, what are you defending this with? And the answer is your life, right? Would everybody agree with that?
Yeah, that's what you swore to do.
I'm a pretty selfish cat, so like my life's kind of important to me. So like, if I'm going to like swear my life to something, I better know damn well what's in the document, right? That was kind of my thought process. And so I would ask of my classes, now remember, I had classes every single week, large amounts of people in these classes. And I asked them, what are the 5 enumerated negative liberties that are enumerated in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution? And in all of the years of doing this, I've been doing this for a long time. I have had 2 classes combined collectively as a class that could name all 5 of them. That's pretty sad, is it not? And one of those classes, sadly enough, it was when Mike and I were in Kandahar together, was the people, I had a mixed class in there, and it wasn't the American soldiers that knew all 5. It was the Brits that were in there.
Yeah. Yep.
Even more embarrassing. So I just did it to hopefully stimulate thought and make people go read the document. And I go back and I read it occasionally. And so what led me to this kind of thought is we were talking about the swamp. And we were also talking about the Capitol Hill circus thing on the 6th. right? That's really all it was. It was just bread and circus, in my opinion. But anyway, but let's look at the people that were really there to protest. How many of them looked at this very simple document and said that this simple document is being violated? And so what do you do? What do you do especially as a veteran? Because I guess on a contractual term, the day that we ETS'd, I guess our contractual obligation to that notion of defending the Constitution with our lives ended. But I don't know that necessarily many veterans, especially ones that have been in not nice places while in uniform, at that point do they go like, I don't know that necessarily expires. So now what do veterans do when they look and they go, man, this is a bunch of bullshit. And the document that I swore to uphold with my life, again, which is pretty valuable to me, it means something to me, is totally being trampled on. And it's not just the Joe Bidens, it's not just the Donald Trumps, it's not just the Obamas, it's not just the George Bushes. I mean, we had the Alien and Sedition Act before the Bill of Rights, the ink was even dry on it. So what do we do? How do we right this ship as veterans? And I think it's a really good question that we should talk about.
Mike?
Nobody was ready for that, I guess.
So, like you said, legally, yeah, our oath ended when we got out. Morally and everything else, does it end? No, probably not, because obviously there's a lot of vets that still will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I mean, that's why a lot of us have. Well, some of you guys have weapons, not me. Some of you guys have weapons to defend yourself against enemies, foreign and domestic, to your house or to your land or to whatever you're going to defend yourself against. So legally speaking, yeah, my defense to the Constitution is over according to the document I signed because it expired for me. But morally to the country, no, a lot of veterans still feel the same way, even though they're not legally obligated to uphold that Constitution or that oath anymore.
What, Mike?
I would agree, but I think the definition of and see if you agree with this, Nate. I think the definition of while we're in, I will defend my country with my life. I think that changes once we exit the military, the service. And when you say I'll defend my country, like you just alluded to with the people having their own personal weapons, they're going to protect themselves, their family, their house, their property. That becomes your country. You know what I'm saying? Like Paul is having an issue over there, wherever he is in North Carolina, New York, or whatever. I'm like, damn, Paul, you got it bad.
Yeah, but if some country decides to come in and invade our country, I might not be in the military anymore, but I'm still going to defend my country.
Yeah, I got that.
I don't have to be active military.
Yeah, to what extent, though? To what extent are you going to go? Like, I don't know exactly where you're located. Let's use me for example.
I'm on the seaboard. I got the ships invading my state.
Right, but now I don't want to get off on a tangent here because I think Paul he brought up a valid point. But if someone's attacking us through New York, me as being, just call it what it is, I'm a Texan now. I'm living in Texas, right? Am I gonna pick up my weapons that, like you, Nate, I don't have? But am I gonna pick up my weapons and go to New York to defend this country? You see what I'm saying? No, I'm gonna do like most of all other Americans, and I'm gonna sit there and watch it on the news and say, "Damn, I hope our boys and girls go over there and do right."
And yeah, until they make it down to Texas, and then you're
right. Until they just in my neighborhood. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I was going to say that
I can't take my guns to New York anyway, so I wouldn't go defend New York. So
right.
I mean, somebody else's guns.
Well, I'd wait till New York. I'd wait till New York fell first.
Sorry, Jim. Go ahead, man.
No, I said I'd wait till New York fell first. But what you're saying is I think it's right. Is I have the obligation still to defend my country, but the practicality is we still have a military. So it's not like I'm going to run to the front lines because I know that we have a military that's going to do that first. So I'm going to be like the second line of defense.
So, well, I mean, that's the militia system, which is also pushed down in the Constitution. But that's, I'm not talking about the country, the landmass. I'm talking about our forming documents, under the quote unquote social contract, which that's a totally different argument. We are, as a society, kind of bound to the rules of law that we submit to be ruled based on these rules that were agreed upon. I'm talking about the Constitution specifically. Not talking about the landmass. I mean, trust me, if the Portuguese got uppity and wanted to like invade North Carolina, if I had a gun, I'd be on I-40 like every other person trying to go do their background check to get a gun to go down there and defend it. But that's not the issue.
Right. Well,
the issue is the people that claim to rule us on both sides. It's one gnarly animal with, two hands, and the hands are always over here distracting you from what's going on, right? That's how I look at Republicans and Democrats. It's just a group of miscreants that want to rule over us, and they do that based upon the notion of this document. And it's a document that at one time the four of us swore to uphold and defend, because that's what guaranteed our liberties as citizens from government. The Constitution really doesn't have shit to say about like if armies or or wars, other than Article 1, Section 8, that the Congress is supposed to declare it, which that hasn't happened since 41. Right, so it's just another usurpation. So at what time do we, as the private citizen who supposedly under the notion of the social contract or have agreed to be ruled under this document, what do we do? Because obviously you can't do shit about it when you're in the military if the government's stepping on the document. Because remember, it's a control on government, not on people.
That's right.
Right. Well, let me give this perspective, because I think while we were in the military, whether we knew what the Constitution was or was not, whether we passed your test or not, I mean, we still had a sense of why we were there. We still had a sense of other freedoms because we've been to other places. So we still had a sense of what America was all about. But while we were in the military, what were the civilians that weren't in the military doing to defend this Constitution? They really weren't doing much. They were kind of riding this whole thing. So when we get out of the military, we become one of those citizens. But my dilemma with that is I wouldn't even know what to do, because there's no civilians here that are leading me to defend it from that perspective. I only know to pick up arms and go defend it. So that would be my dilemma, is that I was trained to fight for this Constitution. I don't know how to do it in the civilian world. And that's where I think the distinction between what were these people doing while we were fighting for this Constitution, what were the rest of Americans doing to defend the Constitution?
And I think I agree with like what Mike said. If it happened to the country, you had the military to defend the country to begin with. They're going to be organized by leadership and blah, blah, blah. Now, as civilians, we're not going to be organized by anybody but ourselves, or maybe a couple of our neighbors get together and say, hey, all right, this is our line. This is our fire field. We're going to protect each other. So, like, I don't think I'm going to run into their front lines. I think I'm going to defend my yard, my perimeter. And that's probably about it. I'm going to defend my family. I mean, now we might retreat to someone. I don't think we'll ever retreat. That's the wrong word to use. But we might go assist other friends at their household because we know they have more ammo and more weapons and more protection. I don't think as a private citizen, I don't have to uphold any constitution. But now the government should abide by it, like you said.
So who enforces that?
That's it right there. When the government doesn't abide by the Constitution, and then when you talk about what is the Constitution,
what do we do about it?
Right.
Who enforces
it? People will tell you now your arms now as a vet or as a normal civilian is to vote. Right? That's a part of your arms right now to defend the Constitution. But when you defend the Constitution, if you truly defend the Constitution, you're really defending yourself, right? You're
in ideal, yeah.
From the powers of the government.
And like we discussed in our previous show we had, it's the interpretation of an individual of what's right and what's wrong with the Constitution. Like, yeah, I think the government can do blah blah blah, but I'm like, no, they can't do that because this isn't this. So it's I believe it's like a lawyer. It's an interpretation of what's written. Like, you might believe something, and I might be. You can have the exact same thing written, and we interpret it 2 different ways. So who's right and who's wrong?
Well, I think when you it's written in pretty common language. You give it to the common person. Most of them are going to come up with the same conclusion. It's generally the people that go, how can I subvert this and pervert this to get one over on you? Those are usually the ones that are interpreting it. My opinion. At least that's been my observation.
Yeah, I have one word for you, Paul. When you say common language, I have one word for you. Unalienable.
Common, except one word.
The key phrase, the key word in that is lean.
I know. I just wanted you to expound on it. Go ahead.
Just like they say, oh, you don't need AR-15s. You don't need 30-round magazines. That's not what the Second Amendment was written about. Well, if you want to talk to me about the Second Amendment, use your First Amendment right and use a quail pen and write me a letter and send it to me on a horse, and then we can talk, right?
Just like we did with King George over and over and over again. And then finally, our founders got to a point that went, all right, listen here, fuckface. We've written a bunch of letters, and all you did was laugh at us, ignore us, call us rebel rousers, call us traitors, put sanctions on us, and you continue to do it anyway. And they got to a point where they're like, no mas.
That means no more for you guys who don't speak Spanish.
And I don't sit here and mean to speak in terms of revolution at all. I really more mean to speak in terms of evolution, right? If that makes any sense. I mean,
yeah, it does.
The American experiment was really super unique, but over 200 plus years, we found there's some inherent flaws that are put into it.
Well, sure, and what's interesting is my son. He's only 11, but he's really fascinated by history. And that means he's forcing it into my world because I wasn't a real history buff. And I mean, everything he's watching, everything I'm absorbing from him, like there was some really bad stuff going on all around the world constantly. Like this it was nothing new to conquer new lands and take over this place and take this back. And like, I was just fascinated by it. So I think what we did in this country did kind of break a mold, but it's not going to be flawless.
No, right. But again, it should be, like I said, it should be an evolutionary process. I mean, if we think about if we were sitting around the pub in 1774 and we were having this discussion, like, you know what? I think we could probably do pretty good without the king and parliament and rule ourselves. I mean, how many people at that point would have been like, like without the parliament? What do you mean we don't have a king? I mean, we have queens occasionally, but what do you mean we don't have a monarch? And the notion that we could rule ourselves was revolutionary, and they tried a system, but it's, as the American author, individualist Lysander Spooner, I'm paraphrasing him, he looked at, the Constitution being one thing or another is, that's beyond debate, but it is either allowed the government that we have today or it was powerless to stop it. And when we bitch about government, man, this is like way overbearing and not what we really want in the consent of the governed, which I was kind of alluding to in the last time that we talked. Now what?
Can you, I know you're paraphrasing, but can you repeat that quote, somewhat quote?
Okay, so Spooner basically said that it's in his book called No Treason, a Constitution of Non-Authority. He annihilates the notion of like the social contract. His logic and reason is very, if you've never read him, he's very good to read. You can read him online for free. But he says that the Constitution has either allowed the government that we have today. He's writing this in like 1858, right? So this is nothing new. So it's either allowed what we have to have today to happen, right? So it either allowed the government, the intrusive government that we have today to happen, or it was powerless to stop it.
That's and I loved, and Jim, if you remember, I did a much more I did a more worse quote than Paul just did, much more worse. In a couple of episodes ago when I was talking about Mr. Spooner, right? So that's why I say the Constitution is the people, and if you listen to that quote, the people allowed this to happen, or we were powerless.
Bingo.
Stop it.
But now the people do something about it. Now they're traitors and terrorists, and they're destroying the Capitol building and everything else. So when does it become extreme, and when does it become defending the Constitution? Where's the line?
As long as
I
you
think
have
if we
this,
all go up there and we ask them real nicely to like follow the
Yeah, no,
document,
you're
I
elected.
think they'll do it.
Yeah, no, your elected officials need to be scared of you as
I
their
agree.
employer.
yeah, absolutely.
We just all need to like put on Halloween masks when we go into the booth and push the little secret button on the computer.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That'll be scary, right? We're gonna vote scary.
Well, it's just like guys. I'm going to talk about something that Paul and I talked about years ago, but and I think Jim, if you remember a couple of episodes ago that I mentioned this also. Just imagine. I don't care which side of the fence you're on or whatever. If we all got together and said, okay, something's not right here. We have to get together, look at the Constitution, right? And then we're going to go to our politicians and say, listen, you guys are not governing us correctly based on the Constitution itself. Just imagine that for a second. Now, what you have there's no division. If there's no division, and that's where the power comes from. Because as long as Jim is over there on the left talking about, oh, this side over here is bad, and I'm on the right talking about this side is bad, and I have millions of people who agree with me, and Jim has millions of people agreeing with him, that divide and conquer still exists. Therefore, we are powerless.
Sure, I get that, but I want to go back to what you're talking about is where does that division, where does that powerless come from? Because if we were following the Constitution, it's like the boiling frog thing. Oh, we'll ignore this piece or we'll interpret this piece different because we want this to meet our agenda or we want this to fit in. So you do that so many times, little by little, and even the people that don't even realize what's happening, by the time they realize, wait a minute, we're so far from the Constitution, now it becomes powerless? I mean, but we're the people that changed it. We're the ones that allowed it to be powerless. So you still have to have some sense of what that document means and stands for.
And I don't think America really cares about the Constitution for the most part anymore. They know the First and Second Amendment. Ask them what Amendment 6 is. They're like, hell, I don't know. What's Amendment 12? I don't know. First and Second. That's all it's talked about. But they don't really care about that. All they care about is what's affecting them. Am I getting free this? Am I getting free that? Am I not getting this? Am I not getting that? What's the government doing for me? Not what you can do for the government.
Right. So then voting is really an act of trying to be behind the guy that's swinging the bat of the state is on your side. He's not swinging it at you. He's swinging it at somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's basically what politics. That's what voting kind of boils down to. Okay. So then really there is no rule of law then. So the notion that we have a rule of law, if our whole form of governments is based on the Constitution, which is the rule of law of our government, then we have no rule of law in this country
anymore.
We have selective law.
I agree with that.
Fine for me, but not for thee.
I think the Constitution is a rule of law, but just because we're refusing to follow it, that's where you're talking about now. That's the state we're in now, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but if you're
refusing to follow it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So if they're refusing to follow it, Jim, and I think that's what we're all saying here, if they're refusing to follow it and we're not forcing them to follow it, where's the rule of law?
Well, but that's what I'm saying, Mike. But in order for them to get to the place where they aren't following it, you had to have people who could care less if they follow it. I mean, not every politician just pulls a switch and says, well, I'm going to promise to uphold the Constitution. Now I'm not. No, some people could care less.
Right. Some people don't care if you if you step on the Second Amendment because they don't like guns anyway. They don't believe in guns. They don't want guns. They think they're bad. So who cares if the government steps on the Second Amendment? No big deal to me. But
that part doesn't matter, right?
But Paul, he believes in his guns and he believes in his rights. So the Second Amendment matters to him. So that's where it is. So I don't believe in guns and don't like guns. I don't care if they step on the Second Amendment. It don't matter to me.
Exactly, Nate. And that's where that division comes in. And that's where, once again, that's what makes us powerless. Because I've had the conversation, debates, and Paul, he can attest to it. Whereas, if you look at one amendment, if it's being violated, I'm like, hey, that's wrong. And if you have a Second Amendment over here, or whatever amendment, right? And somebody, if you look at the Patriot Act or you look at the Second Amendment, it's all the same to me. If you have a group of people over here that's saying, hey, they're violating our constitutional rights, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's a good point. Let's go fight. But you have these sects of our population who say, I'm a Second Amendment guy. Yeah, that Fourth Amendment, I really don't care about that. You want to listen to me, that's fine. I'm not doing anything wrong. And once again, that's where the division comes from. Whereas if we want to enforce our politicians, we want to force our politicians to follow the Constitution, that we all have to get together.
And the division comes from two letters, D and R. Democrats and Republicans.
I think we all knew what you were talking about, Nate.
Yeah, they were separated. So Democrats believe one thing, Republicans believe another, and that's how am I going to tell you that abortion's wrong, or how are you going to tell me that abortion's okay? If I don't believe in it, I don't believe in it. But you believe in it, so now it's right. But I don't believe it, so I'm wrong. It's or any other topic you want to.
Yeah, I got you, but that's a good one. Once again, though, now someone's bringing their religious somewhat freedoms and trying to enforce it on another. Now, where does that fall in with the Constitution? You see what I'm saying? So that's when, once again, that's, to me, I truly believe that's where they create that division. And as long as it's there, we're powerless. That's why when we talk about a lot of topics, I'm like, well, yeah, I can see that. It's wrong. Wrong is wrong.
So
right?
I'm going to guess Paul's more of a constitutional expert than the three of us combined, probably.
Bullshit.
So,
bullshit, not Mike James.
No, Mike James knows everything. Don't even try it, Nate.
So let me put it this way. So the government's stepping on our constitutional rights by making us wear a mask. What constitution is that?
And I'm going to defer that to Paul.
Okay, so there's two things that if it went to court, there's two things that they will claim, right? And one is the General Welfare Clause, which is in the preamble of Article 1, Section 8. Or that's what basically gives Congress certain those are called the enumerated powers. They give them the certain enumerated powers. And it says that they can provide for the general welfare of the United States. That's the United States government. That's not the citizens of the United States, or it would have said the people. So they could say it's in the government's best interest that they make you do that. And the catch-all that they always use is the Interstate Commerce Clause. So anytime there's any trade with any type of people, they can claim an interaction to it, which is BS. If you go back and you read the Federalist Papers on why that was supposed to be there, that was never the intention. That was in FDR's court at that point, where basically they were going through and to keep wheat prices, Wicker v. Filburn, they were trying to keep wheat prices down, and they came to this homestead farmer, and they said, hey, we think you're growing more wheat than you can consume. You got to destroy it, and you got to kill a couple of your pigs. And he's like, well, why? And he's like, well, because it affects interstate commerce. And he said, well, I'm not even in them. I'm not selling anything. And then they ruled in Wicker v. Filburn that just you not even participating in the market affects the market. So pretty much any human action that you have through the Interstate Commerce Clause, they will claim justification for that. Right. So from a constitutional aspect, the abortion thing doesn't. Okay. So we can look at right now and look at the people at the Capitol Hill Circus on the 6th. Right. Those people were practicing 2 of their First Amendment rights. Right? Actually, 3 if you look at it in actuality. But the most important of that is the one that everybody always forgets in the First Amendment, and that's the right for redress of grievances. So you had a large amount of people that showed up in the Congress and goes, hey, this is bullshit. We got to at least look at it, right? There's enough evidence that people are thrown out here to at least say, hey, it warrants that we sit down and talk about it in front of the American people. I mean, for F's sake, we had Senate hearings on steroids in baseball, right? And we can't look at what might be a huge election fraud that went up there. Just look at it. And so they go up to the Congress, and the Congress was like, yeah, F you.
Good thing we're not monetized, because that would have done it right there. You can't say that bad F word.
Did I say it? I thought I said F.
Yeah, I don't know what you said.
I'm sorry
I'm
if
just
I
going to throw that out
let it
anyway.
No
have fun,
worries.
but I'm a
No,
little
you don't have to worry
passionate
here.
about the topic. But so
No,
those people are angry, right? And then, like Nate had said earlier, that they kind of, what do? The people have to fear their government, right, in order for their government to do right. But as soon as you show up and go like, hey, what happens? Now you're a terrorist, you're committing treason, this is an insurrection. We've got 12-foot fences with sea wire all the way around the whole Capitol
Wait,
really?
Walls work?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh.
But think about if all of those people were armed and determined that showed up there.
That's
right?
why I
It's
call it a
whole
circus
big
or
difference
two.
right there. So are they
I'm with
really
you, Paul.
scared of that?
So is it really an insurrection? Were they trying to overthrow the government, or were they just trying to make a point to the government?
Correct. That's why that word is so fallacious.
Yes.
I think they
love
were
this
trying to
guy.
overthrow the government.
I love this guy, Mike.
Yeah, they were trying to overthrow the government with zip ties and
The zip tie story is fake.
They
Is it
use
what?
as an opportunity to pre-demonize anybody that's going to stand up to them.
It's kind of like when they came out with the trespassing bill. You know,
And you know what they should have done? Instead of storming the Capitol, they should have just surrounded it and not let those people out until they did the right thing for America.
Well, that's what
There's a
happened
lot
with
more of
the
us. We
Army.
could have had fire guard shifts. We could have went 2-hour shifts each and still surrounded the Capitol for
I'd have to
years.
skip out on mine like I did in the Army.
Nah,
Hey, it's your
I'm an
turn.
NCO now. I ain't doing fire guard.
well, I'll tell you this. I think with the insurrection on January 6th.
Oh my god. I like
Hey,
circus
Mark,
better.
No,
Was it an attack? Wasn't it,
I
Mike?
like to use that word because it really irritates Jim. So I'm always going to call it like it is. An insurrection.
Triggered.
But no, like I told Jim, I don't care what they call it, and I don't want to get off on on that topic. But Paul and I had a short discussion about this, and he's like, at least this protest or this
Circus.
not this violent act, if you will, they were taking it to the government and not taking it to the corner store. Yeah, the shoe store owner or something like that. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
That was a
they
long
went.
agree.
And now look at that short moment of circus and look at the response. Like anybody who even thinks about getting together like that and causing some stuff, like you're already a terrorist.
Right.
Yeah, you
I
can
said
do
that-
that. You can do that and get arrested, but you can go and steal TVs and it's okay.
Correct.
What?
But you can't go protest your rulers.
I said this to Mike. I said,
Did y'all hear what he just said?
Why do you keep calling them rulers? I know he keeps calling them rulers. They're not. Well,
No, not
they're
the
acting like
rulers.
rulers.
It's
They're not allowed to act like rulers.
No, I get that, but what he said was like when you're talking about stealing TVs and a loaf of bread or whatever out of these local vendors, the stores, but it's like they'll comment on those things and say how bad it is, but then when we take it to the government, like on January 6th, they're like, whoa, wait a minute now. We have to come up with new rules, new laws, new fences.
because it's them.
You're
That's
right.
what them taken to every single time.
That way
In their
they
backyard.
create something to deter the next group from doing the same thing.
Yeah, because it's in their backyard.
Yeah.
It affects them. It's just that simple. That's why they keep getting paid in the middle of a pandemic, and then they argue over our $600 check. Like,
Yeah.
They're getting paid by us.
right? We're paying them to argue over our $600 check. Yeah.
That's true.
All right, guys, you wanna pull the pin on this because we're
No, hey, Paul, you have any last minute comments on that?
No, I don't. Thanks for having me out here again, guys.
yeah. You can still make a comment here. This is the end where we allow you to pull the pin on something, or you can have a person of the week. We're just changing it up now, where you can choose whatever you want to be, positive, negative, or just some dumb comment like Mike might just make now in a second. Anybody got something they want to go with?
So here's my person of the week. We talked about someone earlier in an earlier episode about how Texas is now opened up. But you got Secretary of Defense Austin, who has mandated masks. So now Texas is opened up, but Mike, you go to Fort Hood, you got to wear a mask while you're walking outside now.
Yeah. It's always been like that. Yeah.
Well, no. Now it's mandated to on post to wear outside also. Like you used to be, like I used to go out and run, do some PT outside, and no one told me I need a mask. But now supposedly you need a mask. So Texas is okay, but not Fort Hood or not Sam Houston.
Mike, Paul, got something?
I want to pull the pin. I want to pull the pin on ridiculously high gas prices.
Supply and demand.
That's because
to fill my motorcycle the other day.
That's because of the storm in Texas, not because of politicians, but the storm in Texas caused prices to go up.
Ridiculous high gas prices. How much did it cost you to fill up your bike there, Paul?
Almost 20, right under $20.
Damn, for a motorcycle?
Yeah.
Damn, I can use the high quality stuff and not fill that.
Back in January, I could fill up a Nissan Altima for that price.
Yeah.
Damn. How much is it up there where you are?
I paid $3.08 a gallon for. I put high test in the bike, but it was $3.08 a gallon.
Damn.
265 right now for a regular 87.
239 here. 239. So I'm gonna be quiet.
Even after the storm. I actually do. I do have something. I want to do a person of the week. I don't know who the person is, but Lady Gaga's dogs are back. Woohoo! Her dogs are back. Forget the guy who got shot walking them, but the dogs are back. Thank you, whoever returned those dogs, because I don't know how we could have gone through the rest of this week without that. Thank you, guys.
Those defunded police officers found the dogs.
I do have a person of the week, but I forgot her name. So I feel like an idiot at the moment. But have you watched any of the Mars rover stuff that's out?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the young ladies who is one of the mission flight commanders for that project came to the United States at the age of 17 from Colombia with $300 in her pocket.
Yep.
And she worked her ass off in what people would consider menial jobs and saved her money. And she is now a flight commander on the Mars rover.
That is not
people
possible.
People who tell me that you can't come here to this country and work your ass off, not even being able to speak the language and make something of yourself, that's a bunch of hooey. And
that's
props
impossible.
to this young lady for coming here and working hard and being the first Latina female Mars rover pilot ever. Whatever your name is.
Good for her for coming here legally and learning the language and making a good living for herself. Good for her.
So, Mike, that should make yours interesting. What do you got?
Well, I'm gonna pull the pin on the flight commander for the Mars rover. She said she came here with $300 in her pocket. That was a lie. It was already debunked. She had $302 in her pocket. All right.
Well, that was bus fare. The $2 was bus fare.
Hey, in all seriousness, I do follow the Mars rover, and I think her name was, I can't remember her name, but I don't like you, Paul. But that was good. It was I can't remember the name, but yeah, that was an interesting story about the $300, and yeah, I'll piggyback off of that one. That's my person of the week.
What a ripoff. Anyways, that is all the time we have for this episode. We hope you enjoy what we had to say. We hope you come back. We hope you come to our website, pullthepinalready.com, and check us out. Come be a member. Come get on the show. Until then, Godspeed.
Hey, and pull the pin.
Boom.
Thanks for joining us here at Pull the Pin Already. We hope you had as much fun as we did. If you like what we do, go ahead and hit that like button and share this video with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. But most importantly, leave a comment below. Let us know if you agree or disagree with our opinions. Hope to see you here next time on Pull the Pin Already.